The sound reached him before the shape did. A thin, broken cry carried unevenly across the grass, rising and falling without rhythm, weakened by a throat that had already spent too much energy calling out. When the man crested the slight rise, he saw the cub lying alone in the open, its small body pressed low against the earth as if trying to disappear into it. The space around the cub was wrong. Too empty. No movement in the grass nearby, no watchful shapes holding the perimeter. Just distance, heat, and silence. The cub did not lift its head at first. Its sides moved shallowly, breaths coming too fast for such a small chest. Each inhale fluttered, each exhale trembled, the effort visible beneath the thin fur stretched over ribs that were beginning to show. One forepaw twitched weakly, then stilled again. The cries resumed after a pause, quieter now, less certain, as if the body producing them was already learning that sound cost more than it could afford. The man stopped well back, lowering himself slowly until he was level with the grass. Cubs that young should not have been alone, not exposed in daylight without the layered protection of a pride. Mothers left briefly to hunt, but never far, never without cover. The absence pressed in from every direction. The man scanned the horizon, the wind, the grass line. Nothing answered. No distant movement. No responding calls. The cub's isolation felt settled, not recent. As the man watched, the cub attempted to shift its position. Its hind legs pushed clumsily, sliding rather than lifting, and the effort ended with the body sinking back into the grass. The movement triggered another cry, this one shorter, edged with strain. Its mouth opened, tongue dry and pale, then closed again as the sound faded. Breathing quickened afterward, chest fluttering as the body tried to recover. The grass around the cub lay flattened in places, suggesting it had been there longer than its strength allowed. The sun beat down, unbroken by shade, warming the ground beneath it. Flies drifted nearby, curious but cautious. The cub's ears flicked once, weakly at their presence. Its eyes opened partway, unfocused, scanning without fixing on anything. Hunger, thirst, and exhaustion had begun to blur the world into something heavy and indistinct. The man felt the weight of time in the stillness. Whatever had gone wrong had not happened moments ago. It had been unfolding quietly, step by step, long before he arrived. A failed hunt. An injury. A separation that never closed. Cubs survived on proximity and return. Without it, they faded quickly, not dramatically but steadily, breath by breath. He stayed where he was, letting the cub register him at its own pace. When its gaze finally landed on his shape, there was no fear yet, only confusion. The cries stopped, replaced by a faint rasp as air moved in and out of the small lungs. The cub's head lifted an inch, then dropped back down. Its body trembled, not from cold, but from the effort of remaining awake. The man spoke once, softly, the sound barely shaping the air. "Easy, little one." The cub did not respond, but the sound did not frighten it either. Its breathing slowed just enough to be noticeable, uneven but less frantic. The grass whispered as a breeze passed through, bending gently around the small, unmoving form. The man remained still, aware that whatever came next would be shaped by patience rather than urgency. The cub lay alone beneath the open sky, its cries fading into quiet breaths, while the land around it stretched wide and indifferent, holding the silence of something that had already been lost. Time passed slowly, marked only by the cub's breathing and the crawl of light across the grass. From this closer distance, the signs of what the cub had endured became clearer, written not in dramatic injury but in the quiet failure of a small body pushed too far. Its mouth opened slightly with each breath, tongue dry and darkened at the edges. When it swallowed, the motion was shallow, incomplete, as if there was nothing left to draw moisture from. The skin along its flank no longer sprang back when it shifted, lying loose over bone and muscle that had already begun to waste. The cub's limbs trembled when it tried to move, not with fear but with fatigue. A front paw lifted once, hovered uncertainly, then dropped back into the grass. The effort left the rest of the body shaking in response, a ripple of weakness that traveled from shoulder to hindquarters before fading. The cub lay still afterward, eyes half open, blinking slowly as if the act itself required planning. It had been alone too long. Long enough for thirst to dull instinct, for hunger to quiet urgency into something heavy and passive. The man adjusted his position carefully, shifting just enough to place his body between the cub and the sun. He did not touch it. He did not close the distance more than necessary. His shadow fell across the cub's back, softening the heat, creating a patch of relief without intrusion. The cub noticed the change immediately. Its breathing eased by a fraction, chest movements slowing, the frantic edge worn down by shade and stillness. The land around them felt suspended. No birds crossed overhead. No distant movement broke the horizon. Even the wind seemed reluctant, passing through the grass in hesitant waves that barely stirred the cub's fur. The quiet pressed in, not peaceful, but watchful, as if the environment itself were holding still to see what would happen next. The cub shifted again, this time managing to draw its legs slightly closer beneath its body. The motion was clumsy and incomplete, but it ended with the cub resting more squarely against the earth, conserving warmth and energy. A faint sound escaped its throat, not a cry, just a breath that caught and released. Its eyes closed for a few seconds, then opened again, unfocused but calmer. The man remained motionless, his presence steady, predictable. He spoke once, low and even. "You're safe." The words were placed gently into the stillness, carrying no demand. The cub's ear flicked, a small acknowledgement before settling again. Its breathing remained uneven, but the panic that had shaped it earlier no longer drove it. Calm here was not comfort. It was simply the absence of further strain. The cub's body continued to reveal its limits in quiet ways. Its belly barely rose now with each breath. Its tail lay slack against the grass, unmoving. When a fly landed near its eye, it did not react. Energy had become something to be rationed carefully, spent only where necessary. Survival at this stage was no longer active, was awaiting. The man stayed with it, measuring time in breaths and blinks. He understood that presence alone could not undo what had already happened, but it could slow the unraveling. He watched the cub's chest, the slight quiver beneath the skin, the way its head tilted subtly toward the shade without fully turning. Trust here was not a decision. It was simply what remained when fear no longer had the strength to rise. As the sun shifted lower, the shadow stretched, covering more of the cub's small body. The grass whispered faintly, bending and straightening in the heat-softened air. The cub lay quiet within the shade, breathing shallow but steady, while the land around them remained unervingly still, as if time itself had paused to witness how much could be lost in silence. The change was subtle enough that it could have been missed if the man had not been watching for it. The cub's cries, already thin and uneven, faded into silence not all at once but in fragments, each pause stretching longer than the last. Where sound had once pushed itself out of the small body, there was now only breath, shallow, uncertain, but quieter. The effort of calling had finally outweighed whatever instinct had driven it, leaving the cub still and listening instead. Its body shifted toward the shade without intention, a slight lean that brought its shoulder closer to the man's leg. The movement was weak, almost accidental, but it ended with the cub resting there, weight barely touching, as if even contact had to be rationed. Its breathing slowed by degrees, chest rising with less urgency. The tension that had held its limbs tight began to loosen, leaving them slack against the grass. The man did not respond immediately. He stayed exactly as he was, letting the cub decide whether the closeness would remain. Only when the small body settled fully did he adjust, angling himself just enough to block more of the sun. The cub did not pull away. Its head tipped sideways, resting against the earth, muzzle brushing the fabric at the man's knee. The warmth was steady, predictable, unlike the sharp heat of the open ground. For the first time since he had arrived, the cub closed its eyes and kept them closed. Not in sleep but in rest. The muscles along its back softened, the tremor in its limbs fading into stillness. A faint sound escaped its throat, not a cry, not a call, just air moving freely for a moment. Fear had not disappeared, but it had loosened its hold enough to allow something else in, relief, perhaps, or simply the absence of strain. The man lowered his hand slowly until it rested on the ground beside the cub, close enough to be felt but not touching. He kept it there, unmoving, an anchor rather than an offer. After a long pause, the cub's paw slid forward an inch, brushing his fingers by chance. The contact startled neither of them. It was brief, fragile, and then still again. The cub did not withdraw. Around them the land felt exposed. The grass stood tall and open, offering no cover, no promise of protection beyond what was already there. The horizon lay bare, sky wide and empty. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, passing through in softened waves that barely stirred the blades around them. It felt as though the moment existed without shelter, balanced on patience alone. The cub's breathing grew more regular, though still shallow. Its body leaned more fully into the shade, weight shifting until it rested against the man's leg without effort. The closeness was not affection. It was instinct stripped down to its simplest form. Warmth, stillness, survival without resistance. The cub trusted not because it understood, but because it had nothing left to guard. The man spoke once, his voice low and careful. "Rest now." The words settled gently into the quiet. The cub's ear flicked, a small acknowledgement before relaxing again. Its chest rose and fell in a slow, uneven rhythm, each breath quieter than the last. Time stretched thin around them. The sun hovered lower, light softening, shadows lengthening across the grass. Nothing moved in the distance. No calls answered. No shapes appeared. The moment felt temporary, fragile, as if the land itself were holding its breath, aware that this stillness could not last. The cub lay pressed against the man, eyes closed, body finally at rest. The man remained beside it, unmoving, aware that what existed between them was brief and unguarded. Above them, the sky deepened in color, and the open plains stayed silent, waiting for whatever the next breath might bring. The silence did not break all at once. It frayed at the edges first, disturbed by a low vibration that traveled through the ground before it reached the air. A rumble followed, deep and restrained, carrying no urgency but enough presence to change the weight of the moment. The cub stirred against the man's leg, eyes opening partway, ears lifting as instinct pushed through fatigue. Its breathing quickened briefly, then steadied again as another sound answered the first. From the grass beyond, shapes began to form. They did not rush forward. They rose slowly, bodies separating themselves from the land with practiced control. Tawny backs, darkened ears, the subtle sway of tails cutting through stalks that bent and closed behind them. The pride returned as one, not in alarm, not in confusion, but with intent sharpened by awareness. The man felt the shift immediately. The air seemed to thicken, charged not with threat, but with attention. He eased his leg away from the cub by inches, careful not to startle it, then slowly shifted his weight backward. His movements were deliberate, small, designed to give space without signaling retreat. The cub remained where it was, head lifted now, body trembling faintly as it registered the sound and scent it had been waiting for without knowing. The mother emerged last. She stepped forward with measured pace, her gaze fixed not on the man but on the cub. Her body language was contained, power held in reserve. Each step pressed the grass down with certainty, closing distance while maintaining control. She stopped a short distance away and stood still, reading the scene in silence. Her eyes moved from the cub to the man and back again, assessing posture, scent, stillness. The cub answered her presence with a soft sound, barely audible, a breath shaped into something like a call. It did not attempt to stand. Its energy was spent. The mother's ears angled forward, then eased back. She did not rush. She lowered her head slightly, scenting the air, the ground, the cub itself. The moment stretched, balanced between decision and instinct. The man continued to step back, widening the space, lowering himself further as he went. He spoke once quietly, more for the cub than for the pride. "She's here." The sound was gentle and brief, placed carefully into the stillness. The mother did not react to the words. Her focus never left the cub. When she moved again, it was with purpose. She closed the remaining distance and lowered herself beside the cub, her body curving protectively around the smaller form. Her nose brushed along the cub's flank, then its face, breathing deep and slow. The cub responded by leaning into her, strength returning in a faint but visible way. Its body pressed against hers, seeking warmth that no substitute could provide. The rest of the pride held their positions, watchful but calm. No display followed. No challenge. The man remained at the edge of the space, now fully outside the circle, invisible in posture if not in presence. He did not turn his back. He did not linger longer than necessary. The balance had returned to where it belonged. As the mother settled fully, the cub disappeared beneath her chest, small and fragile but no longer alone. The low rumble returned, softer this time, resonating through her body and into the ground. The grass stirred gently around them, closing the scene without ceremony. The man took one final step back, then another, until distance softened detail into shape. He paused once, long enough to see the pride begin to move, carrying their youngest with them into the open plains. As the light dipped lower and the wind passed through the grass, the land resumed its quiet rhythm, holding the memory of a moment that ended not in loss but in return. The mother did not hesitate once her decision settled. She shifted her weight forward and lowered her head, teeth finding the loose skin at the back of the cub's neck with practiced care. The lift was gentle, controlled, calibrated to the cub's size and weakness. Its body rose from the ground without resistance, limbs hanging slack but relaxed, trust carried in stillness rather than strength. The cub made no sound as it left the shade, eyes half closed, breathing steady against its mother's chest. The pride adjusted around them as one. A few bodies stepped ahead, others flanked the sides, forming a quiet moving boundary without display or urgency. Their presence was not loud, not dramatic. It was simply there, dense, grounded, unquestionable. The grass parted and folded back again as they moved, stalks brushing against fur and legs, erasing the space they had just occupied. The man remained where he was, hands resting loosely at his sides, posture open but withdrawn. He did not follow with his feet, only with his eyes. The cub disappeared briefly behind the mother's shoulder, then came into view again as the pride shifted direction, angling toward the wider plains where the land stretched uninterrupted and familiar. The cub's body swayed lightly with each step, supported entirely by the rhythm of another. As distance grew, detail softened. Individual faces blurred into shape and motion. The low sounds that had once carried clearly faded into vibration, then into nothing at all. The pride did not look back. There was no reason to. What needed to be reclaimed had been reclaimed. The man stayed still long after they passed beyond easy sight. The place where the cub had rested lay empty now, grass slowly lifting itself upright again, shade dissolving as the sun shifted. Nothing marked the moment except the quiet it left behind. He felt it settle into him, not as relief alone, but as something heavier and more permanent. Encounters like this did not announce their meaning. They stayed, waiting to be understood. The land resumed its ordinary sounds. Insects moved through the air again. A distant bird crossed the sky, unnoticed. The wind returned, pressing gently through the grass, carrying scent and dust and nothing else. Life closed over the opening that had briefly existed, seamless and indifferent. The man rose at last, joints stiff, movements unhurried. He took a few steps away from the trail, then stopped, looking once more toward the place where the pride had vanished. He did not try to follow their path with his eyes beyond where it was possible. Some distances were meant to remain untraveled. He turned back the way he had come, footsteps quiet, leaving no mark that would last. The weight he carried was not sorrow. It was not triumph. It was the knowledge of having been allowed close to something fragile and necessary, and of stepping away at the right moment. As the sun lowered further, the plains shifted into softer color, gold giving way to muted shadow. Far out where grass met sky, movement stirred briefly, then disappeared again. The man walked on, while behind him the land held its silence, and somewhere within it, a cub moved safely with its own, carried forward by a strength that did not need to be seen to endure.